Thank you everyone for being here, for having me back. It's an honor. And yes, I am Jen Wilshaw. I have been teaching at Westside for about 12 years. And my passion has been health and fitness and wellness for over 25 years. And that has evolved over time. You know, when I first started, it was about getting people in shape and helping them lose weight. And I have sought higher ways since then, because there's so much more to our life and our health than weighing a certain number and having a certain body composition. So brain health is something that I'm hugely passionate about, because I have seen so many folks in the years that I've been doing this struggle with cognitive decline. I have family, friends who have struggled with cognitive decline to the point of Alzheimer's and dementia, and we'll get into what Alzheimer's and dementia are. It's kind of the backdrop of what's to come. I think that it makes great sense to establish the kind of the backbone of what brain health is all about, and we can't dismiss such things as what is dementia, what is Alzheimer's. Are these things that can change? So I've seen so many people struggle, and like many other health conditions or health disease processes, cognitive decline is no different. So much of it is preventable. So much of it has little to do with age and genetics. Those are factors, but they're not the whole story. And that's the big thrust for what I do. I so want people to understand that aging can be a dynamic process. It doesn't have to equate to what we typically see. And that is assisted living communities, that poor posture, cognitive decline. So that's where I'm at. And
okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering that question, kind of getting us off to a good start. And I'm going to unpin myself and just let's see, remove my pin and just welcome you again. And thank you for being with us for Brainy February.
Brainy February. Okay. I see myself in the same spot, but I'm not sure that.
Okay, I think we're good. I'm not sure how that works, but we're definitely, I think it's recording. So hopefully you're good.
Okay. All right. So we are going to talk about boosting our brain health tonight and next week. Before we begin our two-part journey on boosting brain health, I want to take a moment to ground us in God's truth as it pertains to the health of our bodies and minds. Scripture is very clear. God's genuine desire for us is abundant life with physical, spiritual, and mental wholeness. He's the creator of all things, including our miraculous brains. And this means that our cognitive health matters a lot. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind." 3 John 1:12 says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in every way and be in good health, just as your soul prospers." So this is the biblical foundation of the science of neuroplasticity. It's a big word. Neuroplasticity. NeuroPlasticity, neuroplasticity. And it's basically a neurological term that defines the brain as the most dynamic organ of the body, fully capable of changing continuously throughout the lifetime. In other words, you and I are our environment for our brains. Whatever we think about the most grows. Our thoughts, meditations, words, actions, behaviors mold our brain into something toxic or something wholesome. What we listen to on the radio, hear on the news, read on the internet, think about, obsess about, meditate upon, and pray about. How we move throughout the day. Eat, drink, sleep, socialize, use responsible supplementation, and monitor our health profiles. All of that takes root and reshapes the structures of our brains. And that is why it is so crucial that we rewire our thoughts and lifestyle habits to what I call capital T truth. And my faith-based approach to wellness always starts with God's truths, what he says about divine health and wholeness. And then I teach the evidence-based exercise, movement, and nutrition sciences I have studied through the years. During our time, may I be a vessel of integrity, encouragement, and hope as we learn how to steward well the most dynamic organ of the body, the brain. I think the most practical place to start tonight is with empirical facts and solid answers to some of the most common and concerning questions I hear about brain health, and they're questions that I have myself. So the first chunk of questions will be as follows. What is cognitive impairment or cognitive decline? Does cognitive impairment and or cognitive decline cause Alzheimer's and dementia? And what are Alzheimer's and dementia? Are they synonymous? Are they the same thing? Dementia literally means deprived mind. Dementia literally means deprived mind. It can best be understood as severe cognitive impairment. Severe cognitive impairment that hinders everyday life with the following challenges. Compromised immediate recall of recently learned information. So if I'm with somebody, I work with some Alzheimer's patients and dementia patients, and if I come and visit with them after work or they're part of the flow of my work throughout the day, many times I'll say, I'm so excited to see you. I just finished work. I can sit and visit with you for a while. And they'll say, oh, that's great. Do you have to go back to work today? Are you here for work? There won't be retention of some of the things just discussed. There'll be difficulties with balance, walking, and frequent falls. So balance, walking, frequent falls. Those are often challenges that we see that go with severe cognitive impairment. Trouble with ADLs. ADLs are your activities of daily living. So that includes bathing, dressing, preparing meals, taking medications, managing finances, managing household chores, and completing tasks. So folks who are struggling pretty severely with any kind of brain disease and dysfunction, I'll go into their home and I'll see a lot going on that hasn't been completed. The toaster from breakfast may still have toast in it. It wasn't eaten. The checkbook may be out. The laundry may be in a laundry bin while some of it is still in the washer or some of it is still in the dryer. There are these unfinished tasks. There's often disorientation with time, place, people, and surroundings. There tend to be erratic personality shifts, including anxiety, depression, restlessness, in very severe cases, paranoia, and withdrawal from social or work activities. There are redundant communication patterns that ask the same question over and over. So if I'm sitting with somebody who's in a struggle, and he or she asks about my husband, how's your husband doing? And I'll say, oh, wonderful, he's busy with work. That same question, how's your husband, will be asked in a 5-minute period 5 times. So it's redundant communication patterns. Now, while we all tend to recoil when hearing the above scenarios, because who hasn't forgotten names and the orientation of our keys? Who hasn't left their kids' lunch on the counter? It's important to remember that mild cognitive impairment does not transcend into dementia until tasks of daily living are interrupted. That's the benchmark. When tasks of daily living are interrupted and become downright challenging, that's when we see a next phase unfolding. Now, this is a definition from the Alzheimer's Association. Mild cognitive impairment does not transcend into dementia until tasks of daily living are interrupted. I don't care for that word until, and I don't care for that sentence structure, because to me it suggests it's just a matter of time until it happens, as if it's just going to happen. Without panicking about this, I believe that it's fair to say, from all the research I looked at, that mild cognitive decline can serve as a gentle wake-up call to survey our tendencies and our circumstances. Just take inventory. Memory loss, especially chronic memory loss, should not be viewed as the status quo or as an age-related normal, or as the gene pool we have inherited. Memory loss is a response to how we are living. Memory loss is a response to how we are living. Furthermore, Alzheimer's and dementia are the brain's response to how we are living. I like to, whether it's brain health, cardiovascular illness, cancer, I want to try to understand why, so that I can better inform and better guide and better relay information. And I think it's helpful to understand this. Things don't just randomly happen, right? These are responses, our brain's response to how we are living. Neurodegenerative expert, Dr. Dale Bredesen. Last name is spelled Bredesen, Dr. Dale Bredesen. He takes the following position, and I quote, Alzheimer's is a protective response of the brain against a bad environment. When the environment is good, there's no Alzheimer's. I'll say that again. Dr. Dale Bredesen says that Alzheimer's and other cognitive decline, it's a protective response of the brain against a bad environment. When the environment is good, there's no Alzheimer's. I wholeheartedly agree with this and would dare say that this is how we fight back against any disease or lack. When we fix the environment, everything can change for the better, because we can't heal in the same environment that made us sick. And we're going to discover tonight and next week that there are encouraging options and steps and a whole lot of personal responsibility involved in managing the health of our brains. Okay. Now, as far as Alzheimer's and dementia being one or synonymous, they are not. Mainstream medicine often uses the terms interchangeably, but that is inaccurate. Dementia is not one specific disease. It is a general term describing a decline in memory, reasoning, or other thinking. It's a general term describing a decline in memory, reasoning, or other thinking. Now, the dementia umbrella includes Alzheimer's. That is a specific brain disease that accounts for 70% of all dementia cases. Making sense? So Alzheimer's is a specific disease of the brain that accounts for 70% of all dementia cases. And it's thought to be caused by the abnormal accumulation of proteins in and around the brain. Over time, the brain atrophies and wastes away from that accumulation of proteins. The other types of dementia include Lewy body dementia. That makes up about 20% of dementia cases. And then vascular and frontotemporal dementia. Those are the remaining 10%. So you see this umbrella? Alzheimer's comprises 70%, Lewy body dementia comprises 20%, and then other types of dementia, vascular and frontotemporal, complete that. Okay. And if you have any questions, just jot them down. We'll address them. So that's the first cluster of questions that I often hear. The next cluster of questions that I hear is, what is going on with my brain? I'm forgetful. I'm absent-minded. And what can I do to help? While the news and statistics surrounding cognitive impairment and dementia and Alzheimer's are kind of grim and indeed on the rise, there is hope. In fact, according to Dr. Don Colbert, Colbert, Dr. Don Colbert, he's a New York Times bestselling author on anti-aging and neurodegenerative decline. Alzheimer's and dementia do not have to be the end of the road. In his latest book, Dr. Don Colbert's Healthy Brain Zone, I refer to this for a lot of research. He outlines how memory loss, Alzheimer's, and dementia are not normal parts of the aging process. They are not normal parts of the aging process. In fact, brain disease has far less to do with age and genetics and much more to do with lifestyle choices and habits. I'm just going to read to you right out of his book something to support that. First things first, you need to know that Alzheimer's and dementia are not diseases or sicknesses that you catch, nor do they suddenly, randomly, and unexpectedly appear. Rather, Alzheimer's and dementia are the body's responses to what we are feeding it, doing to it, not giving it, and exposing it to, and to all around how we are mistreating it. The body and brain are simply trying to cope. Sadly, millions of people around the world are knowingly and unknowingly mistreating their brains on a daily basis. An explosive wave of resulting Alzheimer's and dementia cases will devastate lives, families, communities, businesses, and nations, and it's all unnecessary. It doesn't have to happen, which means you can usually stop it if it's diagnosed soon enough, and appropriate action is taken. His words, not mine. Because wow, that's some potent stuff. But I find it hopeful because clearly the best action is preventative, and the second best is immediate treatment of the illness. The bottom line, friends, is that we have a voice and more than a choice in how our brains function, how they age. We have a role to play. Now, the final cluster of questions, and this is the one on which I will discuss quite a bit, is why the global explosion of Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline, impairment, and am I at risk? Are you at risk? As we expand our consciousness to the global epidemic of deteriorating brain function, including Alzheimer's and dementia, we see a rampant trend that does not discriminate. These are diseases not limited to frail, elderly populations. Rather, as Dr. Colbert said, they are random, they are relentless, and they're frighteningly common in individuals of all ages and backgrounds. In fact, research indicates that Alzheimer's and dementia are interconnected, deeply interconnected to the three greatest health epidemics we currently face. And none of these three health epidemics have anything to do with age or genetics. They are obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Now, don't panic if you have any or all. Alzheimer's and dementia cases rank directly behind these illnesses. Thus, there are concerns that obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease may contribute rather strongly to cognitive decline and disease. Statistics do indicate that Alzheimer's and dementia patients are diagnosed and they have pre-existing obesity and type 2 and/or heart disease. Let me just clarify a few things because some of us may wonder, well, what is obesity? I mean, do I fit that mold? Obesity is defined as having a BMI, or a body mass index, of 30 or greater. Your body mass index looks at the safety of your height in relation to your weight, and it can be calculated online. You can Google body mass calculator, and all you do is type in your height, your weight, and it will spit out to you your BMI, and it gives you the norms. But what defines obesity is a 30, if the BMI is 30. Obesity is the result of not only consuming more calories than we need, but it is also due to lack of everyday exercise and movement, because we lose active muscle tissue. Obesity is linked to illnesses such as dementia and Alzheimer's because it creates inflammation in the body. And inflammation is devastatingly damaging to every organ, but especially the brain. Now, here's the stuff that, makes me step back and not get, well, I get a little angry, but then I get more passionate about trying to make a difference. And I lean into all of you to help me spread the word. More than 40% of Americans are obese. That's a lot. That is up from only 13% of Americans in the 1960s. The number of overweight and obese people has never been this high, ever. And our children are following our example. In the last 30 years alone, obesity in children has doubled. In adolescents, it has tripled. And this gives way to the type 2 diabetes wave. Okay, so if we're looking at what causes brain decline, obesity, now type 2 diabetes. As obesity rises, type 2 diabetes rises. In 1976, 5 million Americans had diabetes. Today, more than 100 million are diabetic or pre-diabetic, and this includes children. And finally, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, again, another piece of the equation prompting cognitive decline. Heart disease still remains the #1 cause of death in the United States, with everything we know. And by the way, heart disease begins at age 2, 5, 10. It doesn't start at 60 or just pop up at 60. So what we're seeing here are fertile grounds for cognitive decline. As obesity has risen, type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease have risen, and now Alzheimer's, discovered in 1906 and barely recognized or discussed, has exploded everywhere. This includes early onset Alzheimer's. It is predicted that Alzheimer's and dementia the number of cases will triple in the next 30 years. It's already costing the United States more than $100 billion a year annually. And I don't think that's a bill that we can pick up anymore. How are families going to afford this? How can our nation afford this? And I quote Dr. Colbert, without changing the paradigm, without making changes at the personal level, the statistics will only continue to rise. According to all the research I analyzed in preparation for tonight's presentation and working on next week, I looked at data from the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, the Alzheimer's Association, the Cleveland Clinic, and Alzheimer's experts, Dr. Don Colbert and Dr. Dale Bredesen. According to all of this, the leading causes of cognitive dysfunction and brain disease are what Dr. Colbert calls dementogens. Dementogens, things that cause dementia. I'm going to rank them for you in order. We said it already. Obesity. Obesity is the direct result of calorie excess and our sedentary habits. Obesity is not due to age and barely due to genetics. We discussed how obese our children are. It's not age. The next ranking, the next dementogen, the next thing that contributes hugely to cognitive decline, insulin resistance type 2 diabetes. And that stems primarily from inactivity because it changes how your muscle cells function and how they handle insulin. And of course, it also stems from poor diet. Type 2 diabetes is not due to age or genetics. Type 1 is, not type 2. The third dementogen, cardiovascular disease, heart disease. And that stems from high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and homocysteine levels. Have you heard of that? Homocysteine levels. A homocysteine level is what can be drawn up in your blood work. And it looks at an amino acid in your blood, in your profile. Yeah. Homocysteine levels of 15 or higher are something that we need to be aware of. That's a flag. And that's all correlated with lack of movement and poor diet. According to Dr. Don Colbert, if you want to jot this down, we should be aiming for a homocysteine level of 10 or lower, ideally a 7. So we want to get a homocysteine level, and that can be drawn up in your blood work, of 10 or lower, ideally a 7. So we have obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. First 3 dementagens. The next thing that causes decline, inflammation. Inflammation. Inflammation is at the root of every single illness. Parkinson's, cancer, or every autoimmune disease, lupus, MS, inflammation. And it is inflammation is caused by a lot, and I'm going to give you a breakdown, but inflammation is caused primarily by obesity and leaky gut. Leaky gut. And I'll tell you what leaky gut is. Leaky gut is an unhealthy gut lining that has cracks or holes. Some of the cracks and holes are big, some of them are small. But these cracks or holes permit partially digested foods, toxins, and bugs to enter our bloodstream and then penetrate other tissues of the body, such as the brain. Leaky gut leads to what's called leaky brain. And that's all of the brain dysfunction that we see. Leaky gut equals leaky brain. What are some of the other causes of inflammation? Type 2 diabetes. I hate to be a broken record, but I think it's helpful to hear this. What else causes inflammation? Cardiovascular disease, chronic stress, diets that favor sugar, artificial sweeteners, trans fats, fried foods, and processed foods. Insufficient water intake causes inflammation. Vitamin and mineral deficiencies cause inflammation, and we'll talk a lot about that next week. Inadequate sleep, and by definition, we say fewer than 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night. That causes inflammation. And unbalanced hormones. Okay, so that's the source of inflammation, which is the 4th dementagen. The 5th dementagen, what causes cognitive decline and illness? Exposure to environmental toxins. That includes mold, heavy metals like mercury, lead, arsenic. But environmental toxins also include smoking. It's lifestyle, but it's also environmental toxin. Smoking, vaping, marijuana, big time, and alcohol. And marijuana, I really quiver at that because I have so many loved ones who suffer with anxiety and depression, and they rely on marijuana to suppress that, calm that. And according to the research, there is nothing that kills brain cells like marijuana. The next dementagen, gum disease. Gum disease. After that, general anesthesia. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have surgery. That doesn't mean you say no to a colonoscopy. It's just that general anesthesia is so potent and lingers in the system for such a prolonged period of time that that can become a culprit. But it doesn't mean that we don't have surgeries that we need. Low oxygen while sleeping, in other words, sleep apnea. That's another dementigen. And look what ranks next: genetics and age. So look at that list. We've got obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, inflammation, gum disease, general anesthesia, sleep apnea, and then we get into genetics and age. I think that's really potent. There's a lot we can do. We're not in bondage to our genes. Now, genetics, it's only fair that because it's on the list, and it is a factor, that we address it. The strongest known genetic risk factor in Alzheimer's and dementia is called the APO, E4 gene. Let me say that again. A is in apple, P is in pear, O is in oxygen, E is in Edward, number 4. Capital A, lowercase p, lowercase o, capital E4 gene. The APO E4 gene predisposes us to the greatest genetic risk for Alzheimer's and dementia. And it is the greatest, and it also sets us up for heart attack and stroke. So there's the genetics in that piece. Doctors can order an APO E4 gene test at a lab. But please remember something when it comes to genetics. There are other genes, APO E1, APO E2. It's APO E4 that is the culprit. That is the one that we want to look out for, APO E4. And while we can't remove the gene from our body, I want us to cling to something that still gives us a choice and some power. We can't change our genes, but we can change how they function. That is a scientific fact. Fact. We can't change our DNA, we can't change our genes, but we can change how our genes function. We can flip on genetic switches and activate them, or we can keep them in the off position and dormant with our choices and our lifestyle habits. More than 85% of all disease processes are correlated to lifestyle, not to genetics. Finally, some other things that are dementigens: severe head trauma. So if you've had a concussion, a really bad concussion, I think of boxers, football players, that's big time brain trauma, head trauma. After severe head trauma comes long COVID. There's a lot that doctors don't understand, researchers don't understand in terms of long COVID and really where it ranks, because we don't know enough. That'll come. But long COVID is on the list in terms of something that can contribute to cognitive decline and the impairment of our health, our brain health. And finally, retirement. Depending upon how we use retirement, most folks tend to slow down dramatically and do less, spending their retirement years ill. So that is a list of the dementigens in order, in rank of how they influence the health of our brain. Let's recall what the experts say about all impairments and diseases of the brain, especially Alzheimer's. They are protective responses of the brain against bad environments. Now, while my studies on this have been unbelievably fascinating, I will fully admit that I was a little bit discouraged and even frightened because I'm guilty of exposing my body to, and my brain to, a lot of those dementogens in my lifetime. Artificial sweeteners, big time. Sugar, excessive alcohol, cigarettes, stress. I suffered a very serious concussion with cranial nerve damage when I was 14. I was in a very bad car accident. That's severe head trauma. You may be analyzing your past the same way. But let's rewire our thoughts with positive neuroplasticity. While there's absolutely no way to go back in time and undo what's done, we can take what we've learned tonight and move forward with wild hope and expectant faith. And I really believe that. The amazing thing about the brain that science and faith agree upon is that it is never too late to renew our minds. Never. Every day is another chance to make things new because God designed our brains with what science confirms to be over 500 trillion. I don't even know what that number is. I had to, when I was doing it, I had to write it like 5 times to believe it. 500 trillion synapses. Those are like little communication engines. They are always firing. They're always ready to grow. They are always ready to heal. Dr. Colbert and Dr. Bredesen say that prevention and early intervention through improved lifestyle habits can reverse brain damage that is already done, no matter our age or state of cognitive decline. The Bible says, as we noted earlier, that it's God's desire for us to live with abundant health and sound minds. But what really counts to me is what Jesus said to the man he discovered lying helplessly and hopelessly on a mat right next to a healing pool, settling for 38 years of hopelessness and brokenness, choosing to do nothing about it. And what Jesus said was in the form of a life-changing question that's now our question. Do we want to get well? Now, hear me on this. There are many folks who have debilitating, progressive, terminal illnesses, screaming a desperate, yes, of course I want to get well. I'm not speaking of that. The get well question is for the rest of us who may be opting out a little bit of the role we have in our own wellness. We may find ourselves stuck in ongoing cycles of excuses and frustrating inconsistencies in our health and fitness. We may be sitting on our mats, settling for lack in the form of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, depression, addiction, pain, aches, Alzheimer's, depression, dementia. When there's something we can actually do, there's something. And according to what we've learned tonight, there's a whole lot. But do we want to? Do we want to get well? Rising from our mats is how we practice healthy neuroplasticity because it involves leaving behind dysfunctional habits, behaviors, mindsets, and even people. It reshapes our brains for good. It is not easy, but we aren't in this life for easy, because easy is a lie. So what is the mat from which God is calling you to rise on behalf of your health and wholeness? What is holding you back from rolling that mat up and getting to work? Ask God for clarification. Ask him for help in embracing your part. Ask me for help. Ask Westside for help. We love you and are cheering you on. And please remember, until we meet next week, to nourish And please remember that until we meet next week, to nourish and to flourish our brains toward higher fitness and wellness. We're going to cover a whole lot next week: nutrition, vitamins, minerals, hydration. Thank you for your time, and God bless you and keep you.
Oh my goodness, so much to think about. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for just giving us such a sturdy background on which to stand as we look forward to next week. And friends, for those of you who can't make it next week, we are going to be recording that as well. But there's a few questions here. One was, is it possible to differentiate between different types of dementia?
Yeah, that's huge. That is a month-long presentation in of itself. In the book, Dr. Colbert's Healthy Brain Zone, he goes into the types of Alzheimer's that there are, and there are many. Certain ones caused by inflammation, strictly inflammation, certain ones that are strictly vascular. It's pretty complex. I don't want to take the place of infusing that information into you, because I think I'd lose you. It's super complex.
Okay, but he goes over some of that in the book. Yeah. Oh, so that's a great resource. Another question, can certain medications and or medication interactions mimic or cause dementia-like symptoms? Are you
there? That's in the book. There
okay.
are, I'll say this much, and I actually will be talking about some of it next week, because I'll be talking about responsible supplementation. We want to be careful with certain things like antihistamines, Benadryl. Don't panic, gang. I take Benadryl over the long haul. Certain antidepressants, some of them are very old school. There are things that can create and or mimic some of those patterns. Yet again, another huge topic.
So, okay, I'm just looking to see would you say that sometimes is depression related to cognitive decline necessarily? So if you're exhibiting behaviors, there was a question regarding somebody who's maybe exhibiting behaviors of depression. Is it necessarily, I guess they are somewhat connected.
They're somewhat connected, but it's more a question of how erratic it is, how severe it is, and at what point and why is this coming on. So, depression, I know it well. At its worst, it's a complete withdrawal from life and interest in life. So you want to, as I mentioned in the discussion, look at our tendencies and circumstances. Is that occurring in conjunction with other changes?
Okay, so does anybody, we have a few more minutes, if anybody wanted to unmute themselves, ask a question.
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
My husband is 75 years old, and he stopped going out. He absolutely refuses to go outside. He's got a fear of it. We don't know. He doesn't shower. He very rarely showers. It got to the point we had to hire a nurse to come in here to monitor his blood pressure once a month because he won't see the doctor. And is this a sign of Alzheimer's or dementia?
Well, I can't answer that with certainty, and I would certainly consult your physician. What you're describing, the withdrawal and lack of interest, might be something to get checked.
Well, he's been checked, and the problem is I can't get him to go out to see the doctor. That's the problem here. I mean, if I can get him to go out, it would really, but there's no way he's going to go out. He hasn't been out in 3 years. Somebody comes into the house, she monitors his blood pressure. His blood pressure seems to be, okay, but suddenly he just refuses to go out, just doesn't want to go out.
And it's concerning to watch that. I would, one thing you might want to do is keep a journal to track his progress.
Okay.
Keep a journal, like a health journal, and sort of track what is going on, date it, and do you find that this is progressing in intensity over time? And then definitely.
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but to me, it sounds like dementia or Alzheimer's. I don't know if there's a difference between the two, but very frightening. And he just, the minute he went out, one time I got him to go outside to see the eye doctor. He was so terrified that he wasn't himself.
Oh my goodness. Yes, well, we will, I think that makes sense to try to keep track of it.
You write a journal or
yeah,
something every
yeah.
day. Like today, he was like looking for a fight with my daughter, with me for
Oh.
no reason at all. I mean, I'm going to write that down today.
Yeah,
Okay.
keep a journal. That's helpful.
Any other questions or wonders, or anybody have any looking for any teasers for what we might get next week? You're going to be introducing us next week, Jen, to
Next week, we get into, now that we have the backbone to this, and a real thrust of what is creating from a lifestyle perspective, some of the trends we're seeing in brain changes, cognitive decline, and so forth. Next week, I'm going to empower you with what you can do from a movement, fitness, responsible supplementation standpoint. We're going to talk about fellowship and socializing, staying connected. Really encouraging stuff.
Okay, so next week we'll be really focusing on some things, some actual things, concrete suggestions and things that we can do. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, anybody else have any other questions, anything? For those of you who don't know, Jen does offer a chance to socialize and move and get some infusion of good spirit, which covers all the bases on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You want to say just a little bit about what you do in the Ridgewood area, if you're in the Bergen County area?
Yeah. On Tuesdays and Thursdays at West Side, I offer Safe on Your Feet. It is we call it a balance and fall prevention class, but it's so much more than that. We address every component of fitness, health-related components of fitness and skill-related components of fitness, balance, agility, coordination. It is one of the most wonderful classes I've ever taught. It's something I look forward to all the time because it is so welcoming. Everyone comes in at his or her own unique level. All fitness levels are respected and honored. There is always something you can do in that class, even if you can't stand very well, balance very well, or walk very well. The class is on Tuesdays at 10:30 and 12:15. The class is on Thursdays at 12:15. And then there's also chair yoga on Saturdays at 10:30 at West Side.
Oh, okay.
And yoga, as I'll discuss next week, is a wonderful addition and to add to your wellness repertoire because of what it does for the brain.
What time? Chair yoga is Saturday at 10:30. Okay. And that's open to the public. Bring your friends.
Yes, ma'am.
And yeah. Okay. Well, that is just so, okay. I have to tell people about that. Well, it was great to see everybody and so glad everybody decided to log on. Jen, thank you so much for your research and your work and your just helpful resources, which we can also make sure that we get to people so they, I tried to log it in there so that people are aware of that book, but you can also reach out to Jen. What's the best way to reach you?
Oh, sure. I have my email, J.A. Wilshaw, 1410 @gmail.
Okay. It's all caps because I'm on all caps at this point. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, friends, it's always our wish that as we go from this space, we wish that you be well. And we hope to see you next week.